Welcome to the Mission Driven Leader, presented by TaleoConnects.com, where we explore the new, unknown, and innovative themes for work and give people the ability to show up resilient every day. Here are your hosts, former Chief Knowledge Officer of NASA, Ed Hoffman, and partner and Vice President of Portfolio Management at Taleo, Laurel Sim.
Welcome back to the Mission Driven Leader podcast. And as always, we are hitting it out of the park with the guests that we have going on right now.
Yeah. No, I have to start off. I have to tell you
how much emotion, and I'm a fiery redhead, but the emotion that Roger has provided me was a very different emotion, and it was a lot more. I don't even know how to describe it, but he melted my heart when I came and attended his session, and so I'm really excited to chat with him today.
Yeah, I am more and more impressed by you, actually, Laurel. I'll give you a compliment right here. When you told me that we have Roger Nierenberg working with us on this podcast, this is true. The enthusiasm, the excitement was high. I've been involved in organizations, NASA 33 years. And two of the highlights of my life was learning and listening to leadership and teams and the stuff you go through in organizations when you're trying to excel from Roger. So great job, Laurel. Very exciting.
Yes, I feel brilliant having asked him.
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit about you, Roger. Oh my gosh. I honestly don't even know where to start, but you've had a brilliant career conducting orchestras, and then you evolve that into what I personally believe is even a more established career, which is educating humans on how to connect and how to communicate and actually actively participate together as teams and leaders. And I'm not even sort of doing it justice as to what you've accomplished, and cannot wait to share a video about you and just hear your story of how you even got here. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you, Ed, who you already know, to Roger Nierenberg.
Good to see you again, Roger.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'll try to answer the questions that you raised. How did I come to this? I mean, most of my life, I was just a musician and conducting concerts, but I was doing a lot of music appreciation kinds of things, children's concerts and family concerts, and I like to talk about music. But at a certain point, I felt that I became a little dissatisfied and feeling that the medium is the message, that the moment you try to get people interested in music, you've already lost the audience that you most want to attract, the ones who don't feel so comfortable with it, who don't know how to feel it, who just don't feel as though they belong. And so I challenged myself, was there a way that I could actually create an environment in which they would have the same deep kind of musical experience that I did? And I experimented a lot, and then I came up with this formula, the purpose of which was to build audience for symphony orchestras. But I discovered pretty soon that this was actually a powerful business thing, and that business organizations needed it even more than orchestras did, and that there was an opportunity that the changes that were going on in the business environment, the possibility of much faster communication, the need to be agile, the need to not get caught off guard because you just kept on doing what was working before, that the orchestra was a really very good vehicle for conveying those kinds of messages. And so before long, it became known as a business intervention, which it is. And I still take delight in the way people feel music in it. And obviously that was what was happening to you. It wasn't me that made you cry. It was the music that did. But I created the circumstances that enabled that to happen.
Yeah, in fact, I love how your explanation for my experience, because I have been to other, orchestras and musicals and things like that, and they were perfectly enjoyable, and I'm sure their talent was, just as measurable as my time with you. But it's the way you brought me into the audience, and actually felt like I was sitting right beside, well, in fact, I sort of was sitting right beside them, but I was sitting right beside them. I almost knew them as you were educating me on, well, a little bit about how to be a better human.
Well, it deals
um,
a lot. It deals a lot with communication skills, collaboration skills, leadership skills. But music paradigm is customized around whatever my client's success picture is. I try to, I try to exceed their expectations in terms of what they're trying to accomplish with their people.
could we walk through an experience with you? So it was my understanding that when I saw you in Florida, that you had never worked with this orchestra before, and in fact, it was a group of musicians that came together that had maybe or maybe not worked together in the past. Is that kind of the structure? Do you want to walk us through what that,
Well, it's often the case. I always use the local orchestra wherever the meeting happens to be. Later, next month, I'm going to be doing it in Sweden. And a couple of months ago, I did it in Slovakia. And I do it all over the States. I do it many places. And it's great to work with different orchestras. But for the audience, it has an authenticity because it's people who are from where they're from. Uh, and yes, the orchestra comes together, we rehearse the music, but we don't rehearse what's going to happen. So for the orchestra, it's happening in real time. And they themselves are making discoveries. Uh, and that becomes a kind of irresistible atmosphere to be in when you feel like you're just watching people uh, become enlightened, and it's impossible to not become enlightened yourself in the same way. And then, the when the participants walk into the room, they're used to business setting. They feel so foreign from the orchestra, but by the end of the session, they feel like they have so much in common with the musicians that they feel very close to them.
Yeah, well, yeah, you nailed it on the head. You got it for me for sure. And I know that you've had a lot of interactions with Roger as well. Is there a
Yeah.
couple of moments in time that you want to share to kind of further enhance on what Roger does when you're around
As
him?
I said to Raj, I saw him in the music paradigm the first time with the Project Management Institute. And when there was an opportunity to do the second time, I ran at it. And you hit the key word, Roger, experience. And the more I think, why did I love this so much? It's about leadership. It's about, you get that in a lot of different ways. The other time I felt the emotions I felt was I was fortunate at NASA to attend a dozen space shuttle launches. And there's the experience where you see it and you feel it, but you hear what's going on. And it's so connected. There's so much going on that you're so charged that the learning then is totally open to what's going on. And that's what
Yeah.
happens at the music paradigm, is that you're seeing and you're hearing and you're feeling that you're completely engaged. And that opens up all the doors towards these issues of collaboration, conflict, being ready to get started, the use of questions. And it's so tuned. I can remember back to so many specific events of your presentation and workshop several years later. So
Yeah.
it's that experience that pulls you in from the music paradigm and all the things going on.
Well, what business organizations are striving for is for their people to embrace the future that they're trying to create. Uh, and what I discovered is that people, if you tell them, they may buy in, but what they discover themselves, they have much greater ownership for. So in my sessions, I don't really tell anybody anything. I set up the circumstances, and the circumstances themselves teach, and people draw their own conclusion. And I think that's part of the reason that it goes so deep and lasts so long.
Yeah.
I think that that's probably what was the reaction for me when I participated. Is there a time where you went through when you were doing this experience, because it is very much in the moment and you don't know what's going to come of the experience outside of your overarching intention of it? Was there ever a time where you went, oh my gosh, this didn't work out at all? We got to rethink how we approach sharing this story and creating these messages?
Almost never. But if any time I'm disappointed with what the result was, I immediately think about it a lot. What happened? How did that happen? And I learned from it. And so by this point, it's really very consistent. Maybe we should look at that video, because it's really hard to imagine without, as we talk about it. If I were listening to this program, I would say, well, I can't imagine it. What is it?
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I was so excited to ask all my questions. I already forgot about the video. So let's go to the video. One moment.
Should I give some background?
Please do. Yes, please do. Share with us first.
This is a meeting where the goal is to inspire the leaders of an organization to embrace a more effective leadership style, so that they could enroll the entire organization in this change program. And so I asked them, well, what are some of the leadership behaviors that get in the way? And one of the things is, they said, well, people, sometimes they say the right things. Our leaders say the right things, but they don't really do them. They don't walk the talk. And so you can say to people, it's important to walk the talk. But what I do here is I role play a leader who just exemplifies that behavior. But then they get to hear the reaction from the musicians and from a musician. And the interesting thing is that they get to hear probably what's being said about them behind their backs, but nobody will ever tell them. And yet they don't get defensive about it, and they even see the humor in it. So that's what the video is about.
Fantastic. Let's watch the video now.
In this video, I role play a conductor who gives a passionate speech about the music. But when he conducts, his gestures don't match his words. How'd that conducting work? In a world in which most everything is scripted, it is so refreshing to hear people just speak their hearts and speak their minds spontaneously. It has a kind of authenticity which really wakes up the meeting.
I just kind of tune out when I see that stuff.
Yeah. Just elaborate. What stuff?
I don't know where to start. It was annoying. It was really annoying.
Yeah. Well, what about my description? Wasn't that kind of exciting?
Describe what you wanted, but you didn't do that.
Well, isn't it enough for me to say it?
No.
If I say it and I say it well.
No, it's not. I think, well, to elaborate a little bit, I think all orchestras will do just anything, the motion that you do, and they're so tuned into that and react to that. Yeah. That's what we've been doing for a long time.
Okay, so I have so many questions about the video, but I keep monopolizing all the time. So Ed, I'll let you start this time.
No, it's brilliant. I mean, one of the things that I love about the video, it shows one of the things you do in the music paradigm. And in the book, you have a wonderful book that I read afterwards just to keep it enveloping, is you have a leadership style of conversation. So you're not telling, but you're having a conversation in terms of kind of leading in a certain direction. It seems like you all want to go and preparing both sides for where you're going. Is that kind of a key aspect of your leadership approach, is the conversation, the exploration, the going in a certain direction that we want to get to?
Well, we use the orchestra as a laboratory, and we kind of run experiments. What would it be like if you musicians behave this way? What would it be like if I, as the conductor, behave this way? And then we see what happens. And because it's music, you get instantaneous results. There's no time lag. And so you can see that you change behavior, you get different results. And you can't argue with it because it just happened just now. That's
you
the way
also illustrate the video clip shows a member of the orchestra who seemed to be playing with you a little bit. And, I grew up with the notion of the conductor tells you to do something, you just do it, right? That mindset. But it seems it's different, the relationship. And it's about the
That's
team.
not the reality. It's not the reality in the workplace either. People, a lot of times they get directions and they nod their heads, but they may be thinking, I'm not going to do that. Or they may be thinking, I'll do it, but they don't really understand where it's coming from. They understand that, what comes in their inbox and what has to go in their outbox, but there's not that much curiosity about the rest of the value chain that brought it to your inbox, and the value chain as to when you pass it on, where it goes to. So a lot of effective leadership is inspiring that kind of curiosity about a wider circle of influence.
Yeah. Would you say it's
and
also
really,
about struggling with the bad? It seems like there was a struggle, and so things aren't where you wanted it. There's probably not where the orchestra. So it's struggling with the challenges, struggling with the bad to get to where you want to go. It almost seems like.
Well, I wouldn't frame it that way.
Okay.
I would frame that you have a success picture. I mean, as a leader, your responsibility is to have a success picture,
Right.
and it better be a good one. It better be, because you're going to be asking people to put themselves at risk to a certain extent in order to carry this out. And if they don't see that you're completely committed to it, they're not likely to risk themselves. They're not really to go 100% into it. So you have a success picture that you really believe in, but that's not what the orchestra is going to deliver, because the orchestra, they don't know about that success picture. So you have this gap, and I do, as I'm listening to the orchestra and I'm conducting them, I do a gap analysis, the difference between my success picture and what they're actually doing. And then I try to devise ways of narrowing that gap. And hopefully, eventually, if we get to the point that we're completely aligned, then conducting becomes very easy. You don't struggle with it at all. But how do you get to that point?
It's funny, the term lead by example is quite interesting, because example is like for a short period of time. And what I hear from you is like emulate the experience. Like, so it's a lot more about really consistently being in the moment and showing up with the right intention always, versus saying something and then having these expectations that people simply can't live up to because they don't have anybody to follow. And I think that video is a really prime example of that, especially if those leaders were watching and actually says, oh yeah, that probably does happen every day to us, right? Yeah. And they're laughing.
Well, it's pretty irresistible when you see just very natural and spontaneous behavior, especially when it draws laughter. I mean, I don't tell any jokes in the session, and yet there's a lot of laughter because kind of fundamental truths are being revealed. In this case, I mean, the truth that people who take direction from leaders don't necessarily buy into it just because they're leaders, and they tune people out. If they feel that's not useful for me, they tune it out. Now, that's not often stated openly, but in this particular situation, because of the very unusual circumstances, it comes out in the open, and everybody laughs about it, but there's a really important truth that lies behind it. And it's kind of irresistible. It's so natural. And you can see that violinist, he's blushing so deeply. You can see that that's real. It's very hard to dismiss that. And a lot of times people will walk into the room with a cynical attitude, a know-it-all attitude, or this isn't for me, or I don't play this game, or whatever. But they're always won over because it's such a delightful place to be in, and it's so appealing, and the people are so wonderful.
One of the things that I learned from your work is the leaders tend to believe that they're going to be told when they're not doing things well. We had in the workshop I was with you with one of the leaders said, "Oh, if I'm not doing things well, my team will tell me." And you turned to the orchestra and you said, "Will you tell me when I'm conducting poorly?" Finally, someone smiled and said, "No, I like this job.
No,
I like working here." So you have to communicate.
Right. I'm not going to risk my job for that.
Right.
In addition to is what I'm going to say. If they were really being honest, they said, start another career, make another career. So they don't really feel that they could contribute something that would be positive. They don't know, because they know when they see bad leadership, but they don't know what's bad about it. Right. And they don't want the responsibility for correcting it.
Yeah. And the communication becomes so important. You communicate so many different ways, right? With the baton, with the tone. I've seen you pull people up to see what it looks like when you're in the center, the conductor, and I've seen you push people back to where they're sitting, in the cello position, and you're seeing things totally differently. Can you talk about that? The importance of, communication, the different ways you try to communicate with a team.
Well, one of the exercises that I include in every session is, I call it the podium and the chair. Mm-hmm. Although I don't use those words generally in the session. But what happens is I go to the perimeter of the room and I bring up a participant who's sitting way on the side, and I bring him or her to the podium just to listen to the orchestra, which is for that person a revelation, because they've never stood on a podium. And when you're on the podium, you get all the vibrations are converging at your point. You are at the focal point, and the music sounds and feels completely different than it did before. Well, that's a big experience. But what I point out is that what it reveals is that it's that way in organizations too. Yeah. That every part of an organization has blind spots. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's inevitable, because people are sitting in positions, they have divided responsibilities, and they're not aware of a lot of stuff that's going on. And that the conductors who don't know that people have blind spots are not going to communicate effectively with them, because they're not going to empathize with their situation. And therefore, the directions that they give are liable to be useless. They seem right from the podium, but when they land in the chair, they're useless. And then I often say that, but the conductor, on the podium, you have no blind spots. You can hear it all. You can see it all. And I say that is the leader's blind spot, because leaders who think, and then I do a little demonstration in which I say, I'm going to make a case for the leader knowing all, and I show how with the baton, I can make the orchestra play with energy and start together and everything. But then I say, but the reality is the orchestra can do this just as well without me. And I walk away, and then they do. And I say, so that's, if you think that everything that's good is happening because of you, that's your blind spot. And you're constantly going to be telling people things that they know already. You're going to be making them feel minimized, that they're not important. You're not going to become aware of the things that they could offer. So you start off with a leadership deficit just because of that attitude. Yeah. And anybody who's worked in an organization knows what that feels like, to work with a leader like that.
It was funny when you were walking through everything. I was actually thinking, I don't turn people off. I actively listen. I take a lot of pride in it. What was funny though, when the light bulb came on is, oh no, I don't turn those leaders off. I roll my eyes after the fact saying, yeah, nice lip service, because we know that in 5 minutes, you're going to be going down a different path with a different priority, saying the same thing and still not following through. So it's not so much that I quit listening, but I do really fall into the bad behavior or the real behavior of you're not going to do this, but I'm taking the notes because that's my job. I'm listening because that's my job. But I also know that you're not going to follow through in the end because that's been your behavior, which is also not your job.
Well, a consultant once told me about a situation that frequently occurs, like in a pharmaceutical company where the CEO goes out to visit a lab. And he, let's say it's a he, it could be a she, has the idea that this is what we need from the lab. This is what they need to know. These are the directions I want to give them. This is what I want them to do. And so they go there and they communicate that very effectively. What they don't do is ask, what do you people need? What can I provide? Because I'm the CEO, I have a lot of power. I can make things happen. What do you need in order to succeed? And then to listen and learn about their reality in their chairs so that you can use the vast authority that you have in order to help the whole organization up. So because we tend to emphasize so much what it is that we say and not to emphasize how we listen and how we take in, and especially this attitude of curiosity that is so wonderful in organizations. It's really important to stay in that mindset.
I have a few more questions around curiosity, but we do need to go to commercial break. And then when we come back, we can let Ed lead that chat off. But before we go into commercial, when we get back, Roger, I would love to know what your favorite musical instrument is, because Ed's favorite musical instrument is spoons, because he can take them anywhere, and his beat always looks good, especially after ice cream. Right, Ed?
If you say so.
We'll be right back.
We'll get back to the rest of the episode in just a moment, but first, a word from our presenting sponsor, TaleoConnects.com. As a manager, you know how important it is to solve issues right the first time. If you don't, you risk wasting precious time, money, and resources on things that could make the problem even worse. That is why at Taleo, we start by getting to the root cause of your specific problem, so that together, we can implement the solution that gets you the results you are looking for the first time. Taleo's unique approach to management consulting and resourcing is focused on building a community of experts that work together to help clients solve complex problems and find success in their businesses. We work collaboratively with you to implement the solution that will solve the root cause of your problem, not just the symptoms of that problem. From management consulting and project management to staff augmentation and resource recruitment, Taleo's trusted team can help you take your organization to the next level. If you're interested in learning more about how Taleo can help you overcome your organization's obstacles and take your business to the next level, visit TaleoConnects.com today.
Well, welcome back to the Mission-Driven Leader. I'm getting a little too excited to get into the conversation. I can't even say what we are right now. Roger, the question that we had before the commercial break was, what is your favorite musical instrument? Either whether it's one that you play or one that you love to listen to.
You know, I can't answer that question. It's very disloyal to all the other instruments. They're equally important. So I really can't say. They're all my favorite when beautifully played, you know, by great artists and the composers who know what the potential instrument. They're all wonderful. So my answer is going to be disappointing for you, but it's the truth.
Well, I don't think that's disappointing at all. That's sort of what I would expect from an expert like yourself in the music industry. Ed, do you have a favorite instrument?
Can I give you an example of it for a moment? Ravel wrote a piece called Mother Goose, and he wrote it as a duet for two young pianists of whom he was fond. But then it was so good that he made it into an orchestra suite, and then he made a ballet about it. And the ballet has these various stories that he would read to them, and one of them is Beauty and the Beast. Now, when I did this in a concert, I had the percussionist just do a little run through of all the different kinds of percussion instruments, and we came to the cymbals, and there were suspended cymbals that you roll on, and then this crash cymbal. And I said, the crash cymbal comes only once in the piece. And it comes at that moment when Beauty, this music is intensifying, and it ends with this crash of the cymbal. It's short, but it's an impact. And that's the moment when she discovers to her astonishment that she's fallen in love with this beast. And I think that's so incredibly beautiful. The use of that instrument, it's so imaginative. There's so much heart in it. So how could that not be your favorite instrument, the crash cymbal, you know, at that moment? And that's the way it is with each instrument.
At that moment, I think that's a very powerful statement, for sure. At that moment, I think that the love of the instruments is similar to that for the love of your team. There's nobody on my team that I don't value, trust, and see this true opportunity within them, and it's at their moments of their greatest success that I feel the most reward. Yeah. And so it's I don't think it's any different than that kind of moment that you just shared with us, for sure. Yeah. Ed, I know that you had a couple of questions, but I wanted to ask you quickly about what you do in order to get people to listen better and differently that would be similar to that of the experience that you had with Roger and in his session, kind of helping people to walk through that journey. Yeah.
One of the things we haven't talked about that I think is important that I learned from Roger is when he starts a session, at least the ones I saw, he gets up in front and he waits and he looks around. And I think that's a notion of being ready. You want the orchestra to be ready when you're ready. And I've seen a lot of people will just jump into things, jump into conversations, and they're doing things before people are paying attention. And is getting ready, I think, one of the key things, would you say, in terms of your leadership? What will you do? Because again, you will stand there until people stop their other stuff, coming in the room and chatting, and then they'll see you.
I think that's an astute observation. And conductors have to know when is the moment that's right to start, and not start before it, and not miss the opportunity either. There's this opening when the lines of communication are now open, then communicate right then. Find the moment. And that's something that we routinely do. But in business meetings, you don't normally find that degree of sensitivity to awareness of the audience, So it stands out in that environment.
Yeah, and that's one of the practical things I walked away from.
I never say anything when I'm introduced. I never say a word. I start conducting, so that the first thing that they hear is music, which is making a statement that we start with the most important thing.
I want to maybe follow that up with the vision,
so powerful,
which I think one of the things that people struggle with in organizations is creating the vision, the common mission. You talk about that. And so you're typically working with orchestras that you've just met. They don't know you. They don't have a connection with you. You want to play Mendelssohn's Scottish Symphony a certain way. How do you convey that so that they buy into the vision that you're thinking about?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And of course, it depends upon the orchestra. If you have an orchestra, let's say a freelance orchestra, that has never played together before, and they're playing this piece, well, then you have to assess, do they know this piece? Have they heard it before? Have they played it somewhere else with some other group? If you have an orchestra that works together all the time and they know it and they've played it before, well, then it's a different type of leadership. So you can't really know exactly how to lead them until you hear them play. And while I hear them play, I'm learning a lot about them. I'm learning, first of all, can they hear each other in this space? Do they hear well? Does the room favor certain instruments and other instruments not favored? And are there great artists in this orchestra? Have they practiced the music? Are they prepared? All those things, you're learning that. And ultimately what you want to do is, it's like when you ride a horse. If you decide, well, that's where I want to go that way, right? And you turn the horse to go that way, it's not going to work, because the horse doesn't respond to that. You have to ride the horse in the direction that it's going. And then you find a way to transition it into where it is that you want to go. And in a similar fashion, when you start listening, you want to find out, where is the orchestra's impulse, and then you want to join that, so that they feel that you're not the enemy. You're not trying to change them or remake them. You're aware of who they are, and you're going with them, and then gradually you make the little transitions that start to bring them to where you're going to go. So that requires self-confidence, and it requires patience too. And that's something that young conductors don't know about. They don't know how to take what the orchestra is giving and how to work with it.
Do you think it's just young conductors that have that challenge, or do you think it's a bit bigger than that? That it's not just the experience; it's the person that's holding the room together that actually is creating that.
I think a lot of leaders don't understand this process. They think that their job is to know what should be done and to tell people what to do. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? But and in certain cases, for very simple things, it can work. But that's not what will make an organization successful. An organization that becomes dependent upon hearing from their superiors what it is that they have to do will be slow. They will make mistakes. They won't use their talent. So, and this ultimately shows up in engagement scores, which most every organization keeps. You know, how engaged are you in the work? And if the leader is not entering into a partnership with the workforce, then the engagement is going to go down. So I think it's universal, this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to change direction slightly and talk a little bit about your book, Roger. So it's Maestro, a surprising story about leading by listening, which is, you know, your entire experience. When people come and take in one of your sessions, that's it. It's leading by listening. Ed, I know you've read the book. Is there a specific part in the book that you would like to share or ask some questions about before we just jump right in?
Well, I mean, it's a book, and the workshop, the music paradigm is something you have to experience. So really, it's a wonderful book. I read it. Every chapter was filled with things. One of the things that I really appreciated, so I was in the orchestra back in Brooklyn High School, and I was playing the baritone horn. So I was all the way in the back, and I realized for the majority of the time there, I didn't pay attention to the orchestra conductor, and he didn't pay attention to me. And my whole thing was, when I played, I was focused on not making a mistake, but I didn't hear anything else. It was like a different land. And one of the things you talk about is leadership is not all knowing. Roger isn't the person who has all the answers. And you use a lot of different approaches for getting the team, the orchestra, to take responsibility for what's being produced. And I wonder if you can talk about that. Of how do you get the team, how do you get the orchestra to start being comfortable giving each other feedback, to listen to each other, to break those silos? Because again, when I was playing the baritone horn, I saw the timpani and I was next to the trombone, but I didn't pay attention to anything else. I wasn't being incorporated or engaged that way. How do you engage the orchestra? How do you engage a team when there's different silos?
Well, the first thing is to become aware of how well they're listening. And, you know, great orchestras listen very, very well. And orchestras are not very good. They don't listen quite so well. But even with the great orchestras, you can find gaps in their listening. For example, I remember once, I won't say the name of the orchestra, but it was a great American orchestra. And there's a horn solo, happened to be the Tchaikovsky Fifth Symphony second movement. And the strings are accompanying the horn. And Tchaikovsky writes certain crescendos and diminuendos in the string part that are the natural phrasing of it. And I noticed that when those crescendos were in their parts, the strings would get louder and get softer. And they weren't listening to the horn. They weren't taking his crescendo and his pacing of the crescendo. So the moment I pointed it out, they fixed it immediately. In other cases, if I noticed that, I remember once working with an orchestra that did not work together all the time. And it was Beethoven's Second Symphony, first movement, and there's a quartet of two oboes and two bassoons that play. And I could tell right away that they weren't listening to each other. It was immediate. So you'd think that I would say, no, you've got to listen to each other. But that's basically the equivalent to saying nothing. They say, well, of course we have to listen. We know that. So what I did is I just asked, I asked the oboe to just, I just had them play without me, and I asked the oboe to lead. And then when I heard that the bassoons were not taking her lead, either by not being in time or not being in balance with her, I said, no, go with her. So I'm delegating all the leadership to the principal oboe, and then I'm holding the others accountable for working with her. And then I also encouraged her to play with more freedom, which I didn't. I just say, you can be as free as you like with the dynamics, rather than be more free, which is also directive. Try not to give orders. I try not to. I try to show possibilities and see what they make of them. So they feel like they're in charge. That's called empowerment?
Right.
That is the exact example of empowerment, without question, Roger, without question. The time has flown by, and it's been absolutely amazing. I do have one last question for you, which is, if you were to choose a superpower that you possess, what is that one special power? I've already got a couple in mind for you.
This is one that I have, or one that I want?
It's one that you have. You have a number of them, without question. Would you like to share that with us? And then how do you water that superpower to make sure it doesn't go dull?
I think it's for others to know what my superpower is. The more capable you become, the more powerful in a way you become. The further you feel away from what you want to achieve, because your appetite for potential grows faster than your capability. So you always feel like you're a beginner. And that's the way I feel. So I don't feel like I have a superpower.
I'm going to give you a superpower.
I can't. I'm not the one to know it.
Right.
Well, then I will happily give you a superpower, and I'll let Ed follow up with one as well. I think your superpower is seeing the potential, and creating the space for that potential to blossom. I think that when a leader comes to you and says, "Hey, this is what my team is needing," you can see the opportunity to show them how they can evolve. And I think that's a very special capability that it does not exist in so many people in the world. So that's my superpower to you.
Well, that's a big compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I would say, and I said at the beginning, my experience with Roger, with the music paradigm, and then reading his book was similar to a NASA shuttle launch. And I spent time thinking, they're weird things, but Roger, you have a gift of engaging people. Whether you're watching this as a business leader or you're that orchestra, you see smiles, but you see focus. There's an engagement. And it's obviously because you believe and you love what you do, but you share that with others. And there was and I guess I'll close this way. I remember you were asked why you're doing this. And, people think, oh, it's, the fun, it's leadership development, it's the money, it's all this. And you said simply because you loved orchestras and you wanted more people to start going to the local symphonies. You want them to appreciate that. And I think that comes through in everything. There's what you do and you really believe in, and that makes an invitation for me to come in and want to learn more and more. And, again, I encourage everyone the book is a brilliant leadership book because it's fun, it's engaging, and you keep learning things. And the music paradigm is truly it's a foundational shift in how you feel about things and learn. And so that engagement is just, it's miraculous.
Yeah. The name of the book is Maestro a surprising story about leading by listening.
Yeah.
And hearing your remarks made me think about a superpower. And it's not exactly a superpower, but you probably know the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I read and was a big influence for me.
Yeah.
Well, the habit that begin with the end in mind starts off asking you to imagine that you're at your own funeral, and what would you want people to say about you, and to, as a way of kind of like shifting from the daily struggles onto what it is that really matters to you, and what you aspire, what kind of person. And I thought about it, and I thought, I know what I would want them to say about me, and that is that I was a good listener. If I have a superpower, that's it.
Yeah.
It's the good listening, the good skills of listening, and most certainly for our audience, as a friendly reminder, if you cannot attend one of his sessions, which is called The Music Paradigm, at least go out and buy his book, The Maestro: A Surprising Story About Leading by Listening. You won't be disappointed.
Yeah. And if they have trouble getting it, if you have trouble getting it, then go to musicparadigm.com and we'll find a way, because I think it's out of print right now. Yeah. And some people are having trouble getting it. But of course, I want everybody to be able to benefit from what I wrote.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's your best way to reach out to Roger, and you won't be disappointed. He's also very active on LinkedIn and is always sharing inspirational stories about different sessions that he's hosting. So reach out to him, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future, Roger. It's been absolutely amazing today. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I really loved it.
So Ed, until next time with the Mission Driven Leader podcast, I think we nailed it out of the park one more time.
No, I would use the word joy. Yeah, joy. And coming in, I knew it would be. So thank you, Roger, and thank you, Laurel.
Thanks for listening to the Mission Driven Leader podcast, presented by TaleoConnects.com. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to the show.